All right. So in our first part of this class earlier, we did several important points. First of all, we did a preliminary discussion of the novel's theme of independence versus dependence, and then we explicated various ways in which Ayn Rand, the variations on which Ayn Rand shows her themes. We discussed the trichotomy of the conformist, nonconformist, individualist. We discussed the innovator versus a conservative society, in the innovator versus tradition. We compared and contrasted, well, like I say, we contrasted Roark and Keating on the issue of selfishness and selflessness. And we showed how the selfishness, selflessness question relates to independence, dependence. Now, what I want to do now is focus on several key and further important points of the story. I want to go through the 5 main characters, show the characterizations that Ayn Rand developed, the characters of Roark, Keating, Dominique, Wynand, and Toohey. Then I want to get to a fuller explication of the theme, take a step back, and get a deeper, more essentialized understanding of the Fountainhead. And at the end of the class, I want to do at least a brief discussion of style. I mean, the book is a great novel. Ayn Rand is a brilliant stylist. And I want to say at least have a few minutes discussion on some points of Ayn Rand's writing style. So let's jump in. First thing I want to do is take a look at the 5 main characters in the Fountainhead. And what better place to start than with the main character, with the hero of the novel, Howard Roark. And I wanted to take up the topic of Howard Roark and the nature of Ayn Rand's heroes. Notice that if you've read Ayn Rand's novels, not all of Ayn Rand's heroes are created equal. Now we know from philosophy. That's nice with the American flag flying right outside the window. Yeah, it is dramatic. We're talking about the Fountainhead, which, in my judgment, I always thought the Fountainhead is actually the great American novel. You still hear literary people say the great American novel, remains to be written. I think they're mistaken. I think the great American novel has been written, and of course by an immigrant to America, which is very fitting. They talk about the great American novel. What does that mean? It captures the essence of the American experience, which is individualism. Individualism. And that's exactly what the Fountainhead's about. Anyhow, if you study moral philosophy, you come to realize that virtue is an integrated whole, that every part of virtue is intimately related to every other part, and there's no way to practice virtue without practicing all of the parts. So if in terms of Ayn Rand's ethics, there's no way to be independent without having integrity, without being honest, without being rational, etc. So virtue as a whole, each part entails each other. Now, Ayn Rand and her philosophy of objectivism upholds an entire constellation of virtues. I mentioned some of them. Rationality is the key virtue, and justice, honesty, etc. But each hero in an Ayn Rand novel knows, and especially with Howard Roark, is a stylized, stressed emphasis on a specific aspect of virtue. Roark, of course, is the distilled essence of independence. His MO, his method of operation, is that he sticks to his own judgment across all areas of his life, his buildings, his personal life, everything. And of course, in the face of every possible type of opposition, every possible type of cognitive and psychological dependent who opposes him. For example, I would distinguish 3. It's a little warm here, Marilyn. Can we turn the AC on? Thank you. I would distinguish 3 different kinds of psychological dependence in the Fountainhead. One you could think of as the traditionalists, the Dean, Guy Franken, Ralston Holcomb, et al., who believe that we must follow the great architects of the past. 2 you can think of as the conformists, the Keatings, the John Eric Snights, et al., who believe that we must give the public whatever it wants. And 3, of course, the collectivists, like Toohey, who believes that an individual must subordinate his judgment to the will of the masses. Roark pursues his values, is true to himself, in the teeth of opposition from every and all of these varieties of psychological and cognitive dependency. Now, notice that Ayn Rand portrays Roark as also I think the secondary virtue in Roark's character that she gives a stylized emphasis to is the virtue of integrity, which means allegiance in action to rational values. The best example of that, of course, is the story of the Manhattan Bank building, which we discussed earlier. But just briefly, just for purpose of this discussion, of course, Roark turns down a major commission in the heart of New York City, which would have involved the adulteration of his design. He turns down his major commission, which would bring him money, recognition, etc., in order to stand by a moral principle. That is, to stand by the purity and the integrity of his design. And when they accuse him of being selfless, Roark utters the immortal line that was the most selfish thing you've ever seen a man do. Which means, of course, in Ayn Rand's revolutionary view of what it means to be selfish, that the self is a person's values, that one must remain true to the things that you love, the things that you value, the things you consider important in your life, come what may. Never sacrifice them. It means never give them up for a lesser value or a non-value. And that for Roark, of course, the most sacred value of his life is his buildings, as he says to Dominique, my work done my way. Now, I mentioned this earlier, I'll mention it again. In the character of Howard Roark, and specifically in this scene, Ayn Rand is dramatizing the meaning of Polonius's immortal line to Laertes in Hamlet, to thine own self be true. Because that's exactly what she shows us in this, and that Roark is true to his self, that is, to his values, in action, not just in theory, and under extreme financial duress, not just when it's easy for him to do so. Integrity, I want to point out here. I think Ayn Rand's showing us in the character of Howard Roark that integrity is preeminently the virtue of selfishness. It means remaining true to yourself in action, to rational principles and rational values. Now, notice the relationship here in Roark's character between his independence and his integrity. We know that, if you've read Atlas Shrugged, which all viewers of this discussion of the Fountainhead should go on to read Atlas Shrugged, that all virtues involve a harmonious relationship between consciousness and existence, between man's mind and actual practice in the outer world. Now, independence is a primary orientation toward reality, not toward other men. Independence thereby stresses a cognitive aspect of virtue, that the facts of reality, the facts out here in the world, not the beliefs of others, are the source of truth. Integrity, again, and the statement of what integrity is, the statement of the principle is, integrity is adherence in action to rational principles or rational values. This stresses a practical aspect of virtue, that it's not sufficient merely to hold rational values intellectually, but one must act, stress on act in accordance with them. So independence, notice, is a perspective on rationality. Rationality, to be rational, means to focus on the facts as opposed to your feelings or other people's beliefs. Independence warns us against one way of giving up rationality, of refusing to be rational. One way people abdicate the responsibility of being rational is by placing society before nature, is by placing other people's beliefs, hopes, wishes, expectations above and before the facts. That is by conforming to others, not adhering to the facts of reality as understood by their own minds. So notice that integrity is a practice-stressing, action-oriented virtue. One must do more than simply form rational principles and hold rational values in your own mind. You must also live in unbreached commitment to these values and principles. One must indefatigably pursue these values in action and not be a hypocrite. Now, Ayn Rand has stylized the character of Howard Roark, presenting him as the distilled essence of these two virtues, virtues that dramatize a certain principle of metaphysics. Notice independence says think for yourself. Integrity says act on your thinking. The principle, of course, is that of mind-body integration. That you have to take, or theory-practice integration. You have to take your ideas, take your principles, take your values, and actually act them out in the real world. You have to live in accordance with them. And Howard Roark is the first hero. He's the first ideal man. I mean, Ayn Rand has told us that the purpose of her writing is to show man as he might be and ought to be, to show us the ideal person. And Howard Roark is the first hero to be presented in Ayn Rand's novels as the ideal man. Now, what is the essence of Ayn Rand's ideal man? Notice that he is a thinker, a rational man, a man of the mind. But he is also a doer, a practical man, a man of the body. And Roark fits this description perfectly. On the one hand, he's an architect who designs brilliantly, innovatively, revolutionary new designs. He understands principles regarding architecture that no one has ever seen before. Remember that opening chapter when Roark's taking his drawings out and we the readers get to see it for the first time. And Ayn Rand describes them. They're not Renaissance, they're not classical, they're not Gothic. They're just Howard Roark. That Roark designs as if he was the first man on earth. There was no building tradition before him. He had never seen anybody build before him. It was just his mind and reality, just his mind and nature. He's uninfluenced by any previous traditions. So he's a genius who revolutionizes the field of architecture. But don't forget, I think it's easy to overlook, but I think we should not overlook, that he's also a construction worker, a man who has earned his way through college at the building trades. He's a man who walks on narrow planks, on naked beams hanging over empty space as easily as the best worker. He's a man who handles an acetylene torch so effectively that he wins the enduring respect of Mike Donegan, the veteran electrician who worships only competence. He's been a plumber, an electrician, a rivet catcher, and many other things in construction work. Roark is an expert at building the structures that he designs. He's learned building from the ground up, literally, inductively, by doing it. It is one reason why he possesses such a mastery of the field. It is also one reason why he's a superior architect to his competitors who learned architecture in effect only in the ivory tower, who are not competent in construction, who are, in Mike Donegan's immortal words, quote, teachers' pets who know nothing but pretty pictures and tea parties, unquote. The integration of theory with practice, knowledge with physical reality, architectural principles with construction work, mind with body. This is the essence of Roark's greatness as an architect. So Howard Roark, one last point I want to make on Roark before we move on. Howard Roark is the 180-degree polar opposite of Hamlet. Hamlet is the brilliant intellectual who is utterly paralyzed in the practical realm. He never applies his thinking ability or knowledge to practice. He acts only impulsively, as when he kills Polonius. He has divided thinking from action, theory from practice, mind from body. Hamlet is a Platonic hero. His thinking is relegated to a separate, higher, ivory-towered world divorced from practical reality. As such, he is a hypersensitive, hand-wringing, neurotic non-doer. He's a sweet prince whom Shakespeare considers too fine for this vulgar world, which of course defeats and destroys him. But Howard Roark is an Aristotelian hero who knows that knowledge must be derived from the physical world and then applied back to it in order to promote human life. He is the architectural genius